The trend I'm seeing a lot in my feed is those adjustable tie pants and dresses. What I love about this trend is it just centers around comfort. I'm Vanessa with Ellie and Mac, and today we're going to take on this trend with one of our new patterns, our Paige Palooza and wide leg pants. So let's get started. So, this is a trend that I have been obsessed with for quite some time. I just love the idea of just adjustability. I think it gives our clothes so much wear. And, sometimes as women, we're like a little bloated, or sometimes we just need a little bit of coziness. And these pants definitely fit the bill. Now, let me just take a second to talk about this page pant pattern. This pattern offers so many options. It's amazing. You can do the palooza or the wide leg, which are both such on trend. It also has the back darts, which for somebody who has quite a bit of shape built in, I love the darts. It gives such a great look to my bottom. I also love the deep pocket options. It's definitely a pocket that you can put your phone in and it's not going to pop right back out. Now, there are two options for the waistband. You can have a high sharing one, but the one I actually did today is actually the lower waistband. And this one you normally put elastic in, but not today. Today we are going to be putting in ties. So we're going to be able to finish the sides of the waistband so that you can actually have the ties come through, and so that it gives it that adjustability. I also sized up on these pants one size just to make sure that I had the max amount of comfort I could build into these. Now, a lot of times you see these pants with linen, but today I actually decided to do it with quilting cotton. I just feel like quilting cotton really just holds up really well with pants because, I'm 40 years old. I got the thigh rub, okay? So my thighs are going to be rubbing together, and I want to make sure that I don't cause a hole in the inseam of my pants. Also, sizing up did help me in this area. It just makes it so it's not going to be tight as well as rubbing. So those are the hacks that I use to bring these pants. Let me show you all the details from the cutting table to the sewing to finishing the seams and showing you how to make this adorable waistband with ties.
Some of you might recognize this sweet pea fabric. This is from my summer planning, and I was so excited to do this with the pants. So the size I'm cutting is the medium, and as you can see, there are quite a lot of length options here. So if you're tall, these will work for you. Now you saw that I did chalk in my darts. So there are two darts along the back, and this really helps if you have a really nice shape like I do. I have a full bottom, and so having it come in a little bit does help me have a little nicer shape. I'm really going to be focusing on my iron during this pattern so you can see how much I actually use it. And then here at the dart, I'm just going to sew on the chalk line, lift up my presser foot and my needle, and then I can tie it, and I'll show you tying it in just a minute. But I actually do this right when I'm cutting. I like to get my darts in as I'm cutting so I can chalk it in and have them done, and it just helps everything feel like it's a little more put together. So here I'm just tying the knot. Now when we're tying our darts off, as you know, we don't want to pull too hard because it can cause a little pucker. So right when it's closed, you just want to do a double knot there and then come back with your iron and ironing it down. Just make sure that both sides are facing the same direction with those darts. Now here is the basic waistband that we're going to be doing, and as you can see, I'm going to be actually cutting it a half an inch wider than what the pattern has. By cutting it half an inch wider, I can actually fold the ends in with the seam allowance, and so I have finished edges on the inside, and so it's going to make those adjustable ties work really well in this. And you can really do this with a lot of different fabrics. I actually got some sheet fabric just recently, and I feel that that would be perfect because it's a little thinner. But again, if you have a lot of thigh rub, doing a sturdy cotton is perfect. So here are the deep pockets. So there are regular pockets that are a little closer to what you'd find in a jean for women, and it's just not very deep. And then you have these deep options, which are perfect for the cell phones. And then I just take all my edges that I need to have finished right now over to my serger, and this saves time. So I do all the pieces of the legs that I need serged, and you can see what it looks like right here. And then we're just going to be adding on the pockets. So that's the first order of business that we want to do once we have it all cut and serged. And we're just going to sew the base of the pocket together. Now the seam allowance on this is 3/8, but as you can see, that little piece right there is a little small. So I actually just kept a little closer right here because I wanted to make sure that I didn't come across that. And you can see you're going to do both sides. And so this is about a 1/4 inch seam allowance just right here along the edge of that pocket. I love these pockets. They're so cute. And they're very similar to what a jean pocket would look like. So here I have it already serged, like you could see. And then we were just back at the iron, making sure that we have that crease nice and tight because we're going to be top stitching this. And so we want to make sure that everything looks nice. Now, normally you would top stitch it before you add this, but I like to add a little bit of an extra stitch when I'm sewing on these pockets so I can make sure that it holds down when I add on the waistband, and it just gives it a little more security. So I'm going to show you that here in a second, but here we're just going to be sewing on. This is the inside of the pocket, and we're going to be sewing it down the length, and then we're going to be coming along the bottom. So again, normally you top stitch before you add this on here, but I like to do a little extra stitches when it comes to the top. So here I have it opened. So I have that other side of the pocket hanging down, and then I'm just going to be coming along a 1/4 inch along the seam allowance with a straight stitch. Now here I stop, and I'm going to lift up my needle and my presser foot and cut the threads, and then I'm going to be folding it correctly, like the way I would like it. And then I can easily put down my needle inside those stitches, as you can see right here, and then I can stitch to secure it, and then I can come all the way up. And this is just going to make sure that when I add on the waistband, I don't have any weird fabric coming or messing up the pocket. So I like to add a little extra security right there with that stitch, and then it helps add on the waistband a little easier. And then just sew up the side, and that's the pockets. And these pockets are so easy, but they are a really nice detail. So here you can see both front sides are finished and they look great. And so now we're going to be moving on and putting the back side. So as you can see, the darts are already completed, and now we're going to be sewing along that inside and the outside of each leg. Now we want to make sure that we're not sewing along the bowl, but we're sewing along where the pocket is, and then we're sewing up the inseam. I like to do both of these at the same time, and here we are at the sewing machine, sewing up both legs separately. I like to only have one stitch on the crotch seam or on the bowl because I feel like it gives a little more security. So before we get to that seam, this is very important. This is back to my iron, and I'm just going to flat iron those seams, even though I know they're not going to stay that way and they're not going to hold, but I want to make sure that they're flat ironed for when I do my hemming as well as that bowl seam. And you know, we hope for the best when we're doing this, and sometimes that seam stays and it stays open, and then sometimes we miss it and that's okay. That's the fun part about sewing our own clothes, is that we aim for perfection, but sometimes things kind of get a little weird. And then here I like to just stop when I'm making pants or dresses and just cut off all the extra thread, because here on out we're going to start adding on the finishing details. So this moment of just taking a moment and stopping and ironing and getting all the extra threads out is going to make the finished product look so nice. So it's worth that little bit of time. Now with one leg turned right sides out and the one inside out, I can put the right side leg out inside the one that's turned out. So I have right sides together. You can see my pockets are lined up, and then I have that inseam lined up as well. Now, this is what I was talking about having one stitch go along the whole bowl. This is going to help give a little extra security into that center seam, so you're not going to have the ripping that can happen. And so I just feel like it's a really nice way to go about that inseam, especially if you are prone to having, I sometimes I'm prone to having a little bit of tearing in my inseam on my pants, and so right at the center, like everybody. And so this is a really nice way to help make sure that's a little more secure. And you can see that those are ironed flat, so it's a little easier. And then I back stitch at that seam line right there, just to prevent any holes. And I do these on pants, whether it's for myself or for my kids. It really just helps add a little extra security. And then this is the cool part. This is the part where you get to pull one leg outside the other one, and magically your pants are done. My kids always find this such a magical part. If you've been sewing for a long time, you won't, but it's okay. So here are my waistbands. So I'm going to sew this at a 3/8 seam allowance because that's a seam allowance for my whole pants. And yes, I could have marked this with a measuring tape, but I just felt like putting it into my sewing machine and marking it with thread would be a really quick way for me to make sure that it's going to be perfectly lined up. So here is the 3/8 seam allowance. So you can chalk in or you can use thread like I did. And then we're just going to we're using the iron to iron it down 3/8 of an inch. And then I'm going to mark where the 1/2 inch is. And once I have that marked, I can iron it down. And so this way we have nice rolled finish edges right there. And here I'm going to be doing it on the same. So I'm going to be doing this on all 4 pieces of the waistband because these are going to be left open for the ties. And you can see what it's going to look like right here. And I'm going to iron it down at this point as well. So I use my iron quite a bit when I'm sewing, especially with wovens. You're just going to get better results if you can just keep your iron close and on. And, it just helps make everything go smoother through your sewing machine. So now I'm going to be top stitching down those rolled hem on my waistband, my rolled inside seams of my waistband. And you just want to make sure you back stitch here, and it's going to be really interesting when we put these on, but I do love having them finished instead of just having serge lines in the inside, and they work out perfectly. And you can see right here. So we have it folded in half, and we're going to line it up with the side seams. And you want to just make sure that there is no gaps between there. And so you're just going to do extra clips. And then you want to clip around the center and along the back seam. And you can add as many clips as you like here. Sometimes you need quite a bit. And I just keep adding more and more because I want to make sure that this is secure. And then we're going to start sewing them on. So I'm going to start with, I think this is the back, the back and the front side. And we're just going to be doing, I actually upped my seam allowance right here to a 1/2 inch because the ties I'm going to be putting through are not that thick, and I want to make sure that I can serge and then top stitch the extra fabric down to make sure I hold everything properly. So here I'm just going to stitch at a 1/2 inch seam allowance all the way around this waistband. And this normally holds an elastic, and so when it has an elastic in there, I like to make sure the elastic is tight. But here I do want to maintain the thickness, and I did kind of go back and forth if I wanted to add another seam here to like paper bag this, or if I wanted to have it higher on the waist. So I'll show you all that when we get finished here. But there are some extra options, and there's different ways that you can take this if you add a little extra seam at the top and make it tight for the ties. Or you can do what I did and just leave it with the waistband just like this. And then I think it looks really cute when you have it at your high waist. And here we're finishing right where we began. There is no spacing on those side seams with that waistband, and you can see how those nice finished edges look here. So I've already taken it to the serger, and I'm here with my iron again, and I have this in a little bit of steam in here so I can make sure that these seams hold down. Now we want to make sure as we're ironing that we don't have any extra fabrics. We're kind of pulling that seam flat and then we're ironing down that serge. I love adding this little waistband top stitch. I think it makes pants look finished. Whenever I'm making pants, I make sure that I top stitch on the waistband, but this is completely your option, and you want to make sure that you top stitch again those pockets. I just really think securing those pockets, because they're so deep, and you can really put some heavy stuff in there. So make sure that you top stitch this down on the pockets if you're going to be using the pockets. And as you can see, I'm just making sure that the fabric is pulled down tightly, and then here we are again at the pocket, making sure that it's nice and secure. Your sewing machine, like mine, might struggle a little bit because it is a lot of fabric. So we're going to back stitch this, and now it's time to make the ties. So I have been struggling, and I think I mentioned this. Turning out fabric has just not been the easiest thing. So here I'm doing about a 1.5, not about, I am cutting a 1.5 inch wide ties. This is the full width of the fabric, with it being quilting cotton. It's about 44 inches. And so here I have it ironed down at the edges, and then I'm just going to take my iron and iron it in half. And then we're just going to be pulling in the sides to meet that ironed seam in the center. And this is just a quick way, and we're just making binding. If you have a binding tool, you can use that, but I kind of like to use my hands with it. Just make sure you're really careful and you don't burn your hands. So once you have both sides to the center, you can fold it in half again and iron it. And then it gives you this really nice finished tie that you can see right here. And this we're just going to be top stitching on the edge at 1/8 inch. I like to actually start in the middle, and I sew down one middle and then the other, so I can easily turn it and finish the edges instead of trying to push it in. It's just, for some reason, starting at the middle of the ties are just a lot easier. So here I have I'm doing the other side of this tie. And again, I'm doing it at the 1/8 seam allowance, and then I can easily just sew off the tie instead of trying to push it through my sergers. So that is one of my biggest tips, is if you're going to be doing binding, start at the center. And then it's easy to just sew right off. So here you can see I have one already in, and we're going to be adding on the back tie right here. And so we're just going to be pulling it through that casing. Because we don't have any serge on that casing, because we hemmed it, you can see how easy it comes through. And because we're going to be using these ties a lot, it's perfect. So here we're moving on to making the 1-inch hemline at the bottom of the pants. Now, I really like to just chalk this in with my quilting square and my colorful chalk. I feel like this makes ironing a little easier, and I'm not checking multiple places with my hem gauge or having to find my hem gauge, because oftentimes that is a problem. But I usually can find my quilting square, and I have lots of little chalks all around my sewing room. So this is a little easier for me, if that's what you're wondering why I'm doing it with a chalk line. I do this all the time. I really like having the chalk line, especially when I'm hemming other people's pants. I can make sure that I'm being extra careful. Now I'm rolling this hem line because I want to have that nice finished detail. But these pants do widen, so if you do this, you can straighten up the hemline, or this fabric has a little bit of stretch to it, not a ton, but enough that when I'm ironing these, I can actually stretch it and everything's going to line up without having any, gathering or having any gaping. So it ended up working out for me just fine. But if your fabric is just really rigid, I would just say, either straighten it out or just fold it up once, and that should work as well. But here we are, we're just going to top stitch it on. And if this means that we're stitching up the hemline, it also means that we are almost done. And these pants, I have to say, they come together so fast. I was amazed. And they're really fast for a woven. So here are my comfy, cozy pants with the adjustable waist. I have to say, they are absolutely adorable. And I love this pattern. You can either elevate these pants to business casual or have them absolutely fun like I have here. Look how amazing those darts look. I love these pants so much. And check out the adjustability. Now, these ties not only add a functional element, but they also look so adorable. Like, who does not want to have cute little ties on the side of their pants? This would be perfect for a pregnancy option. And you can see how deep those pockets are. They are perfect for every day. Now, here is another look at these pants, and we were trying not to lose my chicken. So, this is Dolores. You may have seen her in some other videos. She absolutely loves to be cuddled. So, thank you for sparing with me, and I hope you enjoy these fun little pants and make some for yourself.
Yes, the yellow is bright. I love it though. I love the brightness of these pants. It just wakes up every outfit. Whatever top I put with it, I absolutely feel a lot more sunnier with these pants on. I love wearing cotton during the hot summer because it just breathes so well, but I can also wear these pants into winter and fall without being cold. I was thinking about doing options with the side slits, but I kind of wanted a year-around pant. And these pants, I can totally see wearing it with a jacket during the fall or just having it with a sweatshirt and a cozy day home during the winter. So I'm really excited to have these in my wardrobe. And I hope that you've learned some techniques on this video. I really do feel like just making binding for the ties is just a lot easier than trying to figure out how to turn out the ties. I have tried so many ways and I've just realized it's a lot easier just to make the binding. I've also had some comments about ironing. Now, I use my iron constantly when I'm sewing, but sometimes I don't show all that because I'm trying to deal with some time constraints and trying to show you the most sewing as possible. But today, I showed you how much I actually ironed, and you can see that really using your iron to its full potential really helps with the outcome. I am also loving taking a moment before I add the waistband and do the bull seam to cut all my threads. Sometimes I'm having threads poking out randomly, and I realized for a better finish details and to have the outcome look more professional, taking care of those threads at that point is the most perfect time, and then you can add the waistband and everything looks absolutely perfect. Thank you so much for watching. I appreciate it so much. Just having you guys share a little time with me during this busy season of the year is just wonderful. Thank you so much. A like and subscribe would be much appreciated. And we just wish you happy sewing. Thank you. Catch you next time.